Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Hey, buddy. Thank you for joining us for this
And we want to invite you to join us for a special live event coming up in just a few minutes. Oklahoma's News 4 is hosting a congressional town hall with members of Oklahoma's congressional delegation joining us. We'll be talking in depth about the federal response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Join Kevin and Jolene at 7 here on News 4. Meanwhile, thank you for joining us here at 6:30. We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Live from the KFOR studios in Oklahoma City, this is a Congressional Town Hall event with U.S. Senator James Lankford and from Oklahoma's 1st Congressional District, Representative Kevin Hern. From the 3rd District, Representative Frank Lucas. From Oklahoma's 4th District, Representative Tom Cole. And from the 5th District, Representative Kendra Horn. Moderating tonight's event, KFOR anchors Kevin Ogle and Jolene Cheney, along with Karen Larson from the KJRH studios in Tulsa. Live from the KFOR studios in Oklahoma City, this is a Congressional Town Hall event with U.S. Senator James Lankford and from Oklahoma's 1st Congressional District, Representative Kevin Hern. From the 3rd District, Representative Frank Lucas. From Oklahoma's 4th District, Representative Tom Cole. And from the 5th District, Representative Kendra Horn. Moderating tonight's event, KFOR anchors Kevin Ogle and Jolene Cheney, along with Karen Larson from the KJRH studios in Tulsa.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for this unprecedented event. Right now, Oklahomans across the state are seeing this live broadcast and what is a collaborative effort involving 4 different television stations that cover the state and region. I'm Kevin Ogle. Tonight, Jolene Cheney from here in Oklahoma City and Karen Larson in Tulsa will be joining me as moderators. Now, I need to tell you right off the top that the Republican representative from District 2, Mark Wayne Mullen, is unable to join us this evening. He's traveling back to D.C. for committee business. Also, U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe declined our invitation to attend this live event. He did send us a taped interview that we've posted on all the websites of the stations participating in this event. And of course, we do want to thank everyone who could join us tonight via Zoom. We appreciate you being here and your dedication to your work and all Oklahomans.
Now let's get to the business at hand. How this pandemic has dramatically affected everything from Oklahoma's economy to our churches, to our schools and homes. Beginning with Senator Langford. Senator, there have been a number of stimulus packages that have passed to help Americans. You voted yes on the initial $8.3 billion package back in March, but later voted against another stimulus bill. Can you walk us through your decision to vote no, considering the desperate financial situation many Oklahomans and Oklahoma businesses have been facing since March? And it looks like we are having a little bit of audio problems. Let's go to Karen Larson in Tulsa. Karen.
Let's see if I can get it covered.
All right, thank you, Jolene. My question is for Representative Kevin Hern. Last week, you sent a letter to the Treasury Secretary asking him to reopen the IRS call centers to help citizens. Many are frustrated because they can't get any answers about their stimulus checks or any help with their tax questions. Is help on the way, and how soon?
Well, it's very frustrating. You know, we have our Tulsans here and all the people in Oklahoma that are, you know, trying to get back to life as normal, and they're dependent upon the stimulus checks to help them during this difficult time. And when we called the IRS, we couldn't even get help. We checked with our fellow colleagues that you see here and around the districts, and nobody could get through. And so we wanted to reach out to Secretary Mnuchin and make sure that the IRS went above and beyond in getting their folks back into their offices, or at least teleconference in so that people could ask questions. But it was very frustrating. Many of the questions we in the delegation couldn't answer, and it just seemed, not right as far as representation. If we're going to put this money out there, people have questions. You know, where's the check? The website was down. We've seen this happen across the country with many different websites when just the incredible use. And so we felt it necessary to reach out to Secretary Mnuchin, and we're seeing things open up. We're getting a lot of feedback from the constituents that things are starting to get answered, and that's important, and people are getting their checks.
All right, one more question for you, Congressman Hern. Oklahomans are filing for unemployment, as you know, in record numbers, 68,000 just in the first week of May, according to the Labor Department. Now, under this phased reopening, only some are going to be able to return to work. So what do you think can be done to help the rest?
Well, I've been in business my entire life prior to getting into Congress. And first of all, it just breaks my heart to see how many people are unemployed. Just 8 weeks ago, we were talking about the greatest economy in the history of the country. And then also looking at so many people that had, worked so hard to build up their repertoire, their experiences. And then all of a sudden, we in the federal government had to close it down because of the coronavirus. And so it's really difficult to talk to some of these folks. So as we know, with Congress, we passed the extended unemployment funds of $600 a week until July 31st. It was a bipartisan bill and to give help. And so we want to make sure that people are getting back to work as quickly as possible. As we shut down the jobs, we want to reopen the businesses out there as safely as possible and get people back to work. Clearly, with 30-something million people in America and growing, it's going to be very difficult to get everybody back at once, but we want to make sure that businesses have the ability to get people reemployed, or we can't get our government and our economies back open again.
All right, Representative Hern, thank you so much. Let's head back over to Oklahoma City and Jolene.
All right, Senator Langford again, and I think we've got our audio up again. We wanted to know why you voted no on the stimulus package.
Yeah, there's actually 3.5 stimulus packages that have passed. The first one I supported, the second one I did not. And the challenge was a lot of small businesses had contacted me after this had come through the House but when it came to the Senate and said, we have a major problem that's just going to force us as small businesses to lay a lot of people off. At the exact moment we need help the most, this is asking us to pay more in that we can't do right now. So my push, I voted no on that one. And then the Senate took up the third bill. And my major portion of that was the Paycheck Protection Program. That's the section that I worked on. That didn't require small businesses to come up with cash first to be able to take care of their folks. It provided them federal assistance to be able to make sure they got that and they could actually help their employees. So it was a very different approach to be able to deal with that. And that's been obviously exceptionally successful for the Paycheck Protection Program around the country. We've seen a lot of our not-for-profits and for-profit small businesses actually be able to keep their employees. In fact, what's interesting, we talk about the unemployment that's happened right now. We have 30 million people on unemployment insurance nationwide, but the Paycheck Protection Program, that's covering another 50 million employees. So if we didn't have that program, we would have 80 million people in unemployment right now and have a bad situation even worse. So the challenge is to try to figure out, how do we stabilize small businesses? What do we do to be able to help in the process? And what might hurt and make a bad situation even worse? So we're working to be able to get these done. I would tell you, for all of us, this is the first time to ever walk through anything like this.
Senator,
because the challenges across this globe, we have to be able to deal with the hard issues.
I hate to break in here, but we're on a limited time crunch here. We also want to ask about Pelosi's $3 trillion proposal. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say I'm a little shocked by it because it's an exceptionally partisan proposal that's come out that doesn't have Republican engagement, didn't have any kind of engagement on the Senate side. It takes the Paycheck Protection Program and doesn't extend the funding on that one, but it does take the payments that have been done, the economic employment and the assistance checks that have come out for $1,200, and extends it to people without Social Security numbers. Those are people that are not legally present in the United States would suddenly get these same benefits. Extends a lot of things with illegal immigration and keeps anyone from being deported. It moves people out of ICE custody. There's a lot of things that are not COVID related that are some of the wish lists that Speaker Pelosi has wanted to do that is crammed into this 1,800-page bill. This is not what we need to debate right now. Americans are not looking for a partisan issue. They're looking for us to be able to solve the COVID-19 health issues and to get the economy going, not to do things like this bill does, which changes voting forever.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Let's go back to Kevin Okle.
All right, Jolene, thank you. Now let's check in with longtime Congressman Frank Lucas. And Congressman, this next question comes from one of our viewers, so let's all listen in.
Can y'all address the conspiracy theories going on? I think it's creating a lot of unsafety in our communities.
Congressman Lucas, what do you want to tell our viewer about that?
Well, first off, remember, under the Constitution, we're all guaranteed free speech, the ability to offer our theories, to express our opinions. That said, though, we all have responsibility as Americans, as Oklahomans, to look carefully at what's said, to think about what we say before we say it. We live in a time where the national electronic media, I think, whether it's the right or the left, is very focused on marketing their time, their shows. That's why we see a more extreme perspective coming up. But we as Oklahomans, we as Americans, have a right to say what we want to, a right to think what we want to, but we have to be diligent and careful in what we say. We owe that to our neighbors, we owe that to ourselves. So can government dictate what is said? No. But we as citizens have a responsibility to react thoughtfully and address these issues ourselves.
And Frank, Congressman Lucas, I've known you so long, I feel like I know your first name basis.
Absolutely.
Let me keep you for another minute for another question. As of today, 278 Oklahomans have died of COVID-19. You announced earlier this month the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services would distribute an additional $281 million to Oklahoma's rural hospitals, money provided by the CARES Act's Provider Relief Fund. Where will this money be used specifically?
It will wind up in 163 providers in rural Oklahoma. That's the way the money will be allocated. It will go for the purposes in these small hospitals. Some will say, I think, what about everybody else? Well, there's $100 billion in the overall bill. $50 billion of it went to general distribution of hospitals around the country based on Medicare fee-for-service usage. This $10 billion and the $280 million that come to Oklahoma is targeted on the little communities, the little hospitals, the places that those of us who live outside of the metropolitan areas turn for our health care, the places who will be the overflow facilities, the places that matter. This is a good use of funds. We have to maintain at least equity within the availability of health care, because so much of our business in this state, whether it's agriculture, energy, or Main Street, happens all over Oklahoma. So thank goodness we were able to secure this. And thank you to folks like my friend Appropriator Cole for working so hard on these issues.
All right, Congressman, thank you. Let's head back over to Jolene with our next question.
Thank you, Kevin. This next question is for Congressman Cole. One real concern right now, how the pandemic is impacting our tribal nations. What's being done to help Oklahoma's Native American population right now?
Actually, quite a bit. The CARES Act had two features that were very important. First, an extra $1 billion+ for the Indian Health Service to be distributed, obviously, across the country. And by the way, in the two preceding bills that of supplemental, there was also additional money for Native Americans and tribal governments. More importantly, there's an $8 billion set aside. It's actually the largest federal payment to Indian tribes in American history to help them. Now, Oklahoma not only has 39 tribes, a very significant percentage of our population is Native, and those tribes employ literally almost 100,000 Oklahomans, Native and non-Native alike. So Oklahoma is not only going to get a considerable amount of money that we get set aside for state and local governments and CARES, tribal governments will too. And the way this is structured, which is on the basis of population, economic activity, and tribal employment, we will literally get hundreds of millions of extra dollars into Oklahoma through tribal governments that other states, because they don't have tribes or don't have the kind of tribal presence we have, won't be available. So we're almost getting a 2-for-1 sort of deal out of CARES because of tribal activity. And where those tribes are located, again, most people know they partner locally. It's got testing facilities set up. They welcome natives and non-natives alike into that. So again, very important part of our governing system in Oklahoma, and one that will, for the first time in a long time, really receive important consideration under the CARES Act.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And now I want to bring in 5th District Congresswoman Kendra Horn. Your district includes the city with the heaviest population in the state, and there's been a lot of criticism about how quickly Oklahoma City reopened. What do you think about that, and did we open things up too quickly?
Well, I think that the bottom line with all of this is we're in this together. I think that we have to keep that first and foremost in our minds, and we have to balance the needs of our economic engines as well as the health and well-being of our communities. While some may say that this is an either or choice, it's really a yes and that means that we have to be thoughtful and intentional following the recommendations and advice of our public health experts to take the steps that are needed to protect our communities and ensure that we have the resources. That means testing. That's why we've passed historic amounts of funding to ensure that we have testing and contact tracing and the resources and PPE for our healthcare providers, as well as those who are working and families and individuals as they go out into the communities. And the bottom line is that this is something we've never seen before, any of us in our lifetimes. The impacts are beyond anything that we could have imagined. But at the same time, we have to continue to work together. I agree with many of my colleagues in that this should not be, nor should we ever approach it as a partisan issue. This is about making the investments that we need to make. That's why I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus in the Congress. And we proposed a checklist for reopening America that balances the health and economic needs and interests of our communities so that we can navigate this together in an intentional way that helps us move through to the other side.
Thank you, Representative Horn. Let's send it back to Karen Larson in Tulsa. Karen.
Thank you, Jolene. Senator Langford, the Treasury Secretary, acknowledged on Sunday that the U.S. unemployment rate may have already reached 25%, numbers that match the Great Depression. At that time, the government made some bold moves, creating major jobs programs such as the WPA. The Civilian Conservation Corps alone employed more than 500,000 Americans. So what is it going to take now to get Oklahomans the jobs that they desperately need?
Yeah, I was actually on the phone on Sunday with Secretary Mnuchin as well, talking through some of these issues in the Paycheck Protection Program and unemployment. The Great Depression keeps being used as the comparison. It's a very, very different economic issue. The Great Depression, the collapse of the stock market in decades of lower recession. This is the reverse in this. This is a very strong economy that we've had a global pandemic that's moved into, and we have no idea how this works at this point. So the first goal of this is managing the health and safety of individuals. And then the second one is, what does it take to be able to get our economy going again? So there's not an expectation that this is going to be a decade or a decade and a half long depression as we faced in the Great Depression. So the call to make structural changes, to change all of our safety net, to make radical shifts, doesn't seem to line up with really what we're facing at this point. We need short-term help to people that's significant, and then to be able to get us through this and to be able to get us restarted again.
All right. Thank you, Senator. We'll go back across the state now to Kevin Ogle.
All right, Karen and Senator, thank you. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, we're going to float a controversial idea to our delegation. A, quote, guaranteed income for you, Americans, during the pandemic. We'll find out what they have to say about that coming up next.
Yeah, it's fine. You just leave it on.
But
Welcome back to our COVID-19 Congressional Town Hall event. We've gathered members of Oklahoma's congressional delegation to talk about the federal response to the ongoing pandemic, and specifically what's being done to help you, Oklahomans, on the front lines and throughout our communities. Let's begin again with another viewer question. Representative Lucas, one of our viewers, wants to know, why can't there be some kind of extra protection for essential employees? Now, we're talking about employees who are actually being threatened or assaulted while trying to get people to wear masks in certain businesses.
absolutely, it's important that we protect those individuals who are working in the front lines of the public health emergency. There are currently state and federal statutes that exist to protect these individuals, including essential workers during pandemics. I would remind most of my listeners and my neighbors in the 3rd District, there's a tendency anymore in the world we live in to want to federalize everything. 85% of the criminal code, and I'm a farmer, not an attorney, but 85% of the criminal code is state, not federal. The issue here is enforcing the laws that exist on the books. No one should have the right to harass an individual who's trying to follow the public law and trying to follow the orders of the federal government from the president or the state of Oklahoma from the governor. That's not right. It's not fair to the people who are trying to protect our health, and it's not fair to those individuals out there who are at risk. I know some folks say 30% of us will never get this. I know those are around who say that those who get it, 80% will never go to the hospital. But you have to care about the old, the infirm, those with chronic conditions. They won't survive. That's who we as a group, as citizens, have to care about, those who cannot protect themselves. The laws are on the books. They just need to be enforced, and we need to show restraint and civility in these tough times as citizens.
Congressman, thank you. Now let's head over to our partner in Tulsa, Karen Larson, for our next question.
All right, Kevin, our next question is for Congressman Hern. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said last month it might be time to talk about the concept of a guaranteed income for the tens of millions of Americans who are unemployed. Do you agree with any part of that? And is it even sustainable?
No, I don't agree. I mean, we help people out right now because we need to. It's the right thing to do. The government's what shut down the jobs, and so it's important that we take care of those that we've displaced. But and as a general principle, I've always been about guaranteed opportunities, not guaranteed outcomes. And I believe that the Oklahomans that I know and I've talked to, they want the same thing. They want the opportunity to be successful, to succeed, and not get a handout. And so this is about giving hand-ups when we need the opportunity to take care of them. And I think that's the beauty of this country. It always has been the beauty of this country. It's the American dream. It's a thing that a guy like me could go from food stamps and poverty in Arkansas to a successful business owner and now a member of Congress. You know, guaranteed income is giving everyone that guaranteed outcome. And we simply do not have the power. I know the speaker likes to say that, but that's just not plausible in the country where you have free enterprise, free market, where goods are delivered at a value somebody will pay you for them. That kind of conversation is more about a socialist outcome where everybody in America would be dependent upon the government, not only to give them their first check, but to also have the same ability to withhold that check if they didn't vote necessarily the same way or didn't act a certain way. And so we never want to give up those freedoms and those liberties to work hard, get tired, take risk, and when you get knocked down, you get back up and you do it again. Right now, I know everybody has a high level of anxiety with all the jobs that have been lost, and we're doing everything we can from a federal delegation standpoint to make sure that those folks get taken care of until these jobs start coming back. But, if we start looking at going back to the question that Senator Langford had about the PPP loan process, that is brilliant. Keeping people in their jobs with their skill sets and paying them a working unemployment, if you will, that has been a godsend to so many businesses across America. And it's never been done before. And, we're all walking in a new path that nobody has the right answer for. We're trying new things. And right now we kept, as the senator said, about 50 million people working. And we need to make sure that it's understood and that that we're not jeopardizing our kids, our grandkids, and future generations with just tremendous burdens. And we've got to get the economy open back up smartly and get people back to work so they can get on about their lives and enjoy the successes they had just simply 8 weeks ago.
All right, thank you, sir. Jolene has our next question across the state in Oklahoma City.
Thank you so much. Let's bring in Representative Horn. Same question, your thoughts on a guaranteed income for Americans. Good idea, or is it sustainable?
I don't support the idea of a guaranteed income. The challenges that we're facing with this COVID-19 crisis, the health impacts, the economic impacts require that we meet the needs of our communities. The increase of unemployment benefits, the expansion of opportunities and support through the PPP and other programs for business and industries that are suffering, the investment in our healthcare industry and making sure that we are getting the testing and supplies that are needed. Those are the things that we should be doing. We have to ensure that when we're responding to this, that everything we do is timely, targeted, and transparent. Timely in that it meets the needs of right now, that it addresses the needs of families that have lost their jobs, that are doing everything they can to make ends meet through no fault of their own because of the health impacts of this virus and the steps that we've had to take to protect our communities. We need to ensure that we are getting the relief to people as quickly as possible, and that there aren't barriers in the way. When we also think about it, it has to be targeted. We have to ensure that we're not letting political ideologies get in the way of things that are needed in our communities. And I'm not afraid to stand up to leadership. In fact, recently sent a letter with some of my colleagues calling on the speaker to ensure that any package that we bring to the floor is bipartisan. There are so many solutions and things that we can agree on, but healthy debate, transparency, and making sure that they're put into action is critical. We can't let these ideological pieces from individuals get in the way of getting support to our communities, and that has to be the bottom line. It is about coming together. We're all in this together, and giving people a hand up. Resources, whether it's our businesses, whether it's our healthcare, our frontline workers, or our families that are suffering. And we have to meet those needs in an intentional way that is responsible to the taxpayers. So that's not, in my view, a way that we should approach this solution. But we all have to remember we're in this together. And that's why bipartisan efforts that can get all the way through and get resources into our communities are the way that we should be approaching everything we do throughout this crisis.
And staying with you, Congresswoman, back in early April, President Trump and the White House announced federal guidance that encouraged Americans to use homemade cloth face coverings or masks while out in public. But now, just a month later, and with the nation's death toll at more than 80,000, Vice President Mike Pence was seen at the Mayo Clinic without a mask. President Trump toured a factory last week without a mask. What is your take on the way the president and the vice president are following these guidelines?
Well, I don't think that finger pointing is the answer in situations like this. I'm going to go back to what I just said. We are all in this together. We are facing an unprecedented health crisis that has economic impacts. We are learning every day from our researchers and our public health officials how this disease spreads. So I don't think that it helps for us to point fingers at one another. And at the same time, it is critical that we listen to those same experts, our CDC officials, the health officials that have spent their career. Taking precautions is about a way of showing that we care about our friends and our neighbors, protecting those people that have underlying health conditions, our family members, our friends, and wearing a mask and taking extra time to clean and sanitize and follow the recommendations of the CDC to wash our hands is not just about protecting others, protecting ourselves. It's about protecting others as well. And as we take these steps to get through this, we have to remember that we're all in it together, and it will evolve. But doing the best that we can throughout this crisis means that we have to follow the advice. And I just think that finger pointing is not the way to solve it. But I will continue to wear a mask in public to protect my friends and neighbors, and to follow the advice of our health officials. And I think that's a way of showing that we're good neighbors, that we're in this together. To me, it all goes back to the golden rule of treating others the way that we want to be treated.
Representative Kendra Horn, thank you. Now let's send it back over to Kevin Ogle.
Okay, let's bring in Representative Tom Cole and get your take on this same subject that they were talking about. You work with the president a lot. What do you think about the way he and the vice president were seen not wearing masks at some very public events? Because, Tom, you wore your mask in the House chambers. We have video of you there addressing the House wearing your mask.
Well, we've finally stumbled on the right thing to do in the House. That is to wear the mask when you're not speaking and take it off when you are. That was an example, actually, the speaker set. That's what we seem to be doing now. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Look, in terms of the president and the vice president, I think, first of all, the vice president, by the way, did apologize. He said on reflection, he probably should have had the mask on at the Mayo Clinic. But you have to remember, they are tested every single day. And the mask is more about protecting people around you. The odds of either one of them coming down with it and us not knowing almost immediately are pretty low. So again, I don't see the need to be critical there. They're just trying to communicate and express a position of optimism. So I think, again, you abide by the rules, but in this case, I don't think there was any material danger to anybody.
And Representative Cole, Oklahoma is an agricultural state. What's being done to help our farmers right now? And on that same note, what's being done to ease the burden we keep hearing about, this ongoing meat shortage?
Well, first of all, my friend Frank Lucas probably knows more about agriculture than the rest of Congress combined. He's a former chairman of the Ag Committee and, of course, the one Oklahoman in production agriculture. So he's the expert there. But look, we are trying to do a lot, but it's not enough, in my opinion. We and CARES appropriated $19 billion for farm relief. That is starting to get out the door. It needs to get out the door a lot faster. We did about $3 billion recently to shore up food banks and distribution areas, again, purchased from American farmers. In terms of the meat problem, the problem certainly isn't the farmers. They're producing plenty of livestock for us. The problem is the processing plants. And we need to get a lot more testing there. Again, they're picking that up. They're starting to move. And we need to make sure that there's not any price gouging going on. That is, our farmers are getting underpaid. I mean, if you look, they are losing money on livestock right now. And yet the consumer's not getting that kind of break. So there's a middleman there that's doing pretty well. So we're going to have to work on this supply chain issue. We're going to have to continue to support farmers in this particular time because, honestly, they've been supporting all the rest of us. In all this tragedy that we've had, we've been able to count on a good, safe food supply. Lots of people in the world can't do that on any given day, let alone in the middle of a pandemic. And the backbone of that's agriculture. We have over 80,000 farms and ranches in Oklahoma. Again, my friend Mr. Lucas probably represents the majority of them, but 14,000 of them are in the 4th District of Oklahoma. And their dedication to continuing to produce is what keeps any of us from having to worry about going hungry while we're taking care of other business. So maintaining that strong agricultural base, essential to national security. They're our best exporters as well. They earn money for us overseas, and they make sure the average American pays less for food as a proportion of his income than any other people in the world. So very valuable part of our economy, and one that we are making significant investments in, but we got to do more and we got to get it out the door faster, in my opinion.
Congressman, thank you. Let's bring in Senator James Lankford again. Many Oklahoma communities are losing out on vital revenue right now. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the leader of your party and of the Senate, raising a few eyebrows a few weeks ago, saying he would be in favor of allowing states to use the bankruptcy route. He has since backed off of that a little bit. Is this even a viable idea, do you think?
No, long term, that's not a viable idea. We need stable cities, communities. We need stable county government to be able to function and be able to operate. They need to be able to get loans and to be able to do bonds and the things that they've got to be able to do construction on this. What Mitch McConnell was specifically talking about, and we had the opportunity to be able to talk to him about it later, was his concern was there is a push to try to get as much money out the door as possible by some of our colleagues to say they want to really bail out some of these broken pension systems in a lot of states. You've got states like Illinois or New York or California that are way overextended on their pension programs, and they see this CARES Act, or they see the next version and what's coming to the House on Friday has almost $1 trillion that goes to the states with no strings attached. That's really designed to be able to bail out bad pension programs more so than what it is to be able to help stabilize what's going on right now in so many areas where they have desperate need. In Oklahoma, we have a unique issue for us. Our state is very dependent on sales tax revenue. A lot of other states, they have a mixture of property tax, sales tax, income tax that'll all come to their communities. We don't do that. We just do sales tax for our communities. So that makes times like April, when sales tax revenue fell to almost zero across the state, that it becomes a really dramatic issue for them. Many of our communities will end up losing 40, 45, 50% of their sales tax revenue during April. That is very, very difficult for law enforcement. So the challenge that we have is our state was given $1.5 billion to be able to help the state through the CARES Act. That'll also go to counties and to cities to help get them through. It was never designed to be able to make everyone whole. And there is this focus to say, well, the federal government needs to cover every city, every county, every state in America, everything was lost. There's no amount of money that we could borrow to be able to do that, nor should we borrow to do that. This is doing enough to be able to get us through this process and to be able to get to the other side of it. And that's what we tried to be able to provide in the CARES Act. $1.5 billion is a very large amount for us as a state. Our normal state revenue is about $12 billion a year. So we're covering $1.5 billion of that right now just in the CARES Act.
My friend and your friend, James, Mike Turpin, who's one of our Flashpoint co-hosts, is fond of saying Oklahoma is the land of soil, oil, and toil. Let's talk about oil just real quick. I want to get your take on this because not too long ago, commodity prices were in the negative territory, below zero for oil. We have some oil companies here converting to making hand sanitizer because the oil patch is such a rough place to make money right now. Any ideas on helping them out?
Yeah, the Paycheck Protection Program that was done for small businesses, and the vast majority of energy companies are small. We know in Oklahoma, when other people say those big oil companies, we know it's the guy down the street, or we know it's our neighbor, or we know somebody that's on one of these family-owned energy companies. Those folks can all get the Paycheck Protection Program. That'll provide them 8 weeks of salary for everybody on their team. If you're a medium to larger size or small business, there's also loans that are available at very low credit with no collateral to be able to help try to get them through this. But this is a supply issue. The big challenge that we have is the world has 30% more gasoline than the world needs because almost the entire globe stopped for a month. And so we've got dramatic oversupply, and it's going to take a year for us to be able to just recover from this oversupply. One of the things that I pushed on pretty hard is opening up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for additional storage. We tried to get that in the original CARES Act, and that got blocked to be able to purchase oil to be able to put over there. So we worked is to be able to open it up just for storage, because one of the challenges that we have is these oil wells that are still producing, because you can't just shut them off magically. These oil wells that are still producing, we don't have a place to be able to store the oil right now. And so opening up about 55 million barrels worth of capacity that's open space in our National Strategic Petroleum Reserve will at least help provide a spot where people can store it now so they're not losing money on it as we did just a month ago, as you mentioned before. So we've got multiple options there to be able to try to help these folks in the energy companies that we desperately need to be able to survive to be able to maintain our economy.
Yeah, it's worth more in the ground right now than above ground, unfortunately. We want to take another quick break, and when we come back, getting vital technology to rural Oklahoma. We'll discuss that next.
And the song in.
Yes, thank you. Yes. It's going well, thank you. One tiny glitch and we rolled with it.
Yes.
Now be sure you.
Yes, thank you.
speech had been a little longer, it'd have really been great.
Welcome back to our Congressional Town Hall. Representative Hearn, a viewer wants to know, do the representatives feel comfortable returning to Washington, D.C. and getting back to work? Do you think the Speaker of the House will allow that anytime soon? This viewer says, quote, get back to Washington and get back to work for the people.
I totally agree, and I would think that all my colleagues agree. As a matter of fact, Senator Langford and Representative Cole are both in Washington, D.C. right now. This is a frustrating thing, is that we have our citizens, and this is what really the average person, we as the American people, are out going shopping. We're going to Walmart, we're going to Home Depot, we're going to Lowe's, we're doing things, but somehow the Speaker can't allow us and can't figure out how to get us back into Congress to do the people's work, the job that we were elected to do. And what's even more frustrating about that is that somehow, we're going to go back on Friday to vote on a bill that basically she put together herself, and with no input from committees. And it's been very frustrating to see this. Up until now, the bills have passed very bipartisan, knowing that we needed to get the money to the American people. And we've spent, are appropriated about $2.5 trillion over the past 7 weeks. We need to let that get into the economy. You've heard that from Senator McConnell. You heard that from Leader McCarthy. You heard that from the president. We need to get that in. I think my colleagues would agree. We need to let the money that we've already sent into the economy, let it get in and work, and so that we can see do we need to do something else? Will the economy return? Unfortunately, and I know we've all talked about this being bipartisan, and it shouldn't be bipartisan, but there was a poll that just came out, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, by a very reputable pollster in the state of Oklahoma, which I believe is representative of most of the states in the country, that it talked about, and they looked at all of the reasons, should we or should we not return the economy back to, start opening it back up. And unfortunately, the poll didn't show there was the problem was between young and old, or urban and rural, or geographic locations around the state. It was strictly whether you were Republican or a Democrat. Now, I don't think any of my colleagues believe that the COVID-19 virus has an R or a D behind it. And that's what's preventing us from going back to Washington, D.C. and doing our committee works, sending the bills through the proper process, giving proper debate in the committees, coming out of the committees, debated on the floor, and go through regular order. Because when you don't do that, then you have a bill like Speaker Pelosi is putting up for us to vote on Friday that will never see the light of day in its current form in the Senate. It will never be passed. It's strictly a political season. And it's very frustrating because I know the American people are tired of this, and we all need to work together, as my colleagues have all said here, to get something done. And we can't do that if we're not in Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of conversation about proxy voting, a lot of conversation about doing virtual meetings and debate over virtual, but that's not in our 250 years of being a country. And we need to be responsible. We did it before. We voted in blocks so that nobody was, we did the proper social distancing, had masks, and we stayed in our office. And, we have to get back and return America to regular order.
All right, Congressman Hearn, thank you so much. Jolene Chaney has our next question.
Thank you. We're going to go to Congressman Lucas now. With Oklahoma's working from home and students taking part in distant learning, internet access is really vital right now, but not everybody has access to this technology. Congressman Lucas, you are introducing the Universal Broadband Act. What is the status of this, and will it be enough to serve everybody, including those rural Oklahomans?
First off, let us remember that one of the critical lessons we've learned from the coronavirus, or COVID-19, however you want to describe it, is how important certain tools are to enable our society to continue to function, our businesses. Broadband, internet, is one of those critical tools. Whether it's telehealth or doing your business, it is just critically important that it be available to you. And we live in a society where if that's not available, people will move. Rural America, simply because there are miles between customers, not customers per mile, this has been a slower process in building out. Many places in rural Oklahoma don't have access yet. And that's what the Universal Broadband Act is all about. Take the Universal Service Fund, something that's existed since the 1930s, to make sure that there was minimal telephone service to everyone, and use that to address broadband and the internet service. Now, will it be enough? I can't say that's the case, but I'm confident it's a big step in the right direction, And the more we build, the more obvious the need will be, the greater the impact. If anyone believes that a person under 30, 40, maybe 50 years of age is going to live in a part of Oklahoma or a part of America where they can't access this technology, you're fooling yourself. And we cannot depopulate the countryside, the people who make agriculture and Main Street, the oil and gas business function and work. So that's what this bill is all about. A model established in the 1930s, now to be used to focus on making sure broadband is available to everyone else. And if I go offer a side note about the masks issues, Linda Lucas, my spouse, is very sensitive. So after I come back from DC, I wear my mask for 14 days at home on the farm. That's being cautious.
It is being very cautious. And we do have one more question for you. There are a lot of ranchers in your district as well. How can you address this problem with meat? Perceived problem that we're talking about, yeah.
We have a bottleneck. We have a great demand from consumers right now. We have plentiful supply of cattle, pork, poultry, everything. But we've got this bottleneck, as Tom Cole referred to, in the processing plants, where you have people working together, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, doing very physically demanding effort, turning that cow into steaks and hamburger, turning that hog into pork chops and bacon and sausage, turning that chicken into chicken breast. It's very physically demanding. Many times it's done by first-generation Americans who are working very hard, but in the environment they're in, they're more exposed than most people are. Right now, you see the state health departments, whether it's in Oklahoma or Iowa or Nebraska, across the country, working diligently with those packing plants to test, to isolate, to protect their workforce, because that's critical. We'll work our way through this, but ultimately the answer will be, whether it's late in the fall or early next spring, is a vaccine. And from the perspective of the science committee that I'm the ranking member on, there are 120 different vaccines being developed right now to try and address COVID-19. That's the ultimate key. But until we get a vaccine that works, until we have an antibody system that works, then we've got to be careful with how we interact with other people.
Congressman, thank you so much. Let's go back to Kevin Ogle.
Congressman Lucas knows a lot about that, being from western Oklahoma, the Cheyenne area. Representative Horn, a huge issue for Americans, the toll this pandemic is taking on our mental health. Now, Governor Stitt announced earlier this month FEMA has approved funding for crisis counseling. What will this involve, and how will it help support mental health initiatives?
The toll on mental health is not something that should be understated. We know that we have in Oklahoma and across this country experienced a crisis of mental health, and it's an issue that must be addressed. There are a few pieces to this: the isolation, the distance, the impact of the economy, and as this crisis continues, we know that is only going to increase. That's why in the earlier pieces of legislation that we passed, I fought hard to ensure that we had additional funding for our certified community behavioral health centers to get people access to mental health support services they need. That under the CARES Act, we were able to expand opportunities for people to get support for mental health, to have telemedicine sessions so they didn't have to go in, so they can get the support they need. And we also need to continue the work to ensure that there's parity for mental health under the healthcare acts, and make sure that people get access to the healthcare that they need. This is really going to take a multi-pronged approach. And we know that right now we are experiencing health and economic crisis. The mental health impacts and the longer term impacts are something that we don't yet know what's going to happen on the other side of it. So we need to make sure that there are sufficient access to mental health resources for people across our communities, and take proactive steps to make sure that they can get the support they need. And this is something that we should continue to work on, an issue important to all of us.
All right, thank you. Now let's check in with Congressman Cole again. Dozens of sites now open across Oklahoma for testing. Governor Stitt says he wants anyone who needs a test to get a test. But why in the world have we been so far behind on testing in this country? Or, Tom, do you feel like we're right on schedule?
Well, we're not on schedule, but we're catching up to schedule. There's no question we got off to a slow start. We were very focused on people coming in from China. They did that pretty well, repatriating Americans, but we had a problem with the initial tests at the CDC. We're looking into that now, but we're now testing more than any other country in the world. We're at about 350,000 a day. In Oklahoma, we've done, I think, close to 100,000 or just over 100,000 tests. We're about 33rd of the 56 different units in the country. That's the 50 states, DC, and the territories in terms of the percentage of our populations being tested. So we're getting there. We also have to remember we've been fortunate in Oklahoma. We may not always be fortunate, but the reality is we've had fewer cases than most other states in the country. We're like seventh lowest in terms of infection rates in Oklahoma. That meant the initial testing supplies went to places like New York City, like Los Angeles, like the West Coast, like New Orleans and Detroit that have been hit on average much worse. But again, I think we've got a good plan. We've got 56 labs in Oklahoma capable of testing. We have a good plan in place. Our universities have really done yeoman's work for all of us. So I think we're developing the capacity that we need.
Congressman, thank you. Let's head back to Tulsa again with Kara.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I'd like to go back to Senator Langford. You've been tapped by the president to serve on the Coronavirus Economic Task Force. We know how tough it is out there right now with the economy. We've heard a lot of ideas tonight. The bottom line, how in the world do we get America's economy kickstarted again?
Yeah, that is the grand challenge. The committee itself that I serve on really has the opportunity to be able to look over the president's shoulder. We're not forming the plan. Obviously, the president, the vice president, and his task force, they're forming the plan, but they've invited us to be able to come in, look at it, evaluate it. Are we making the right steps in this? What could we do better? And trying to give counsel into the process. The challenge that we have is that not every part of the country is the same and is recovering the same. What Tom Cole was just mentioning before, we're not New York City or New Jersey. New Jersey has had more deaths from COVID-19 than we've had total cases from COVID-19. And so what we've recommended and what is actually happening is a slow phased approach as each region is even within a state. Some states, even part of the state opens, part of the state does not. But as each region or as each state sees some success and sees a downward trend and has enough capacity in their hospital and has enough testing equipment that if they need to ramp up even faster, they could, then they can start to slowly reopen. But they're really empowering the governors to be able to make that decision. They're going to see what's happening. This is where we really see federalism at its best. This is not a central government running everything from Washington, D.C. This is everyone looking at local leaders, governors, mayors, evaluating what's the situation on the ground. We're seeing that here in the United States. Quite frankly, we're seeing that around the world right now. Germany is slowly reopening. Italy is reopening. Spain, half of Spain is now reopened. South Korea is mostly open again. In fact, South Korea just had an election last week where they had in-person voting, and they had the highest percentage of voters that they've had in almost 30 years. So there are other parts of the world that are engaging, trying to figure out how to be able to do this the same as we are in this process. So we're trying to learn from others that are experimenting. We're also trying to be able to set the pace. But the goal is we've got to be able to protect those that are most vulnerable, but also to be able to get our economy going. We can't keep the economy down until we just have a vaccine. We hope to have a vaccine by November or December. That's where we are on target, but we got to be able to slowly, cautiously open.
All right, Senator, thank you so much. That's it from Tulsa. Let's go back to Kevin and Jolene in Oklahoma City.
Been a pleasure having you, Karen. Thank you very much. Senator Langford, one more question. You were talking about vaccines. You've been working with the heads of the NIH, National Institutes of Health. James, give me 20 seconds on what you're finding out.
Well, just met with Francis Collins on this. This is somebody Tom Cole works with a lot as well on the House side. He is very optimistic we will have a vaccine that works, that healthcare professionals can have by probably October, and the rest of the population can start to get by November and December. That will be very helpful to us.
Senator James Langford and everybody involved, thank you so much. That's going to be a wrap on things here on News 4. Thank you to all of our delegation for joining us for this COVID-19 Town Hall meeting.
We appreciate you, our viewers, for joining us as well. I hope we've helped to bring you some answers during this unprecedented time. We'll see you back here tonight at 10.